So hello all and welcome, and I am the Bachelor Philosopher, also known as the Realist Philosopher. And in this video, I'd like to talk about the subject of walking away and the often misunderstood effects that this will have on Western culture as a whole. So, a lot of guys think that walking away from women is going to change something. Many believe that if they deny women their direct support in the form of marriage, cohabitation, or supporting children, that women will eventually come around. They'll reach such a tough spot in their lives that they'll eventually, wake up and change. We as men, generally speaking, we have a much more pragmatic approach to life. If something isn't working for us, we tend to sit down, think about it, figure out why it's not working, and then try to come up with a solution and fix it. And if we come to the conclusion that fixing is not possible, well, we just do away with it and we try to find something else, some other way that will work. After careful deliberation, of course. Well, women, they don't work that way, okay? Women, they're emotional beings, and as I'm sure you're well aware, they tend to work off of and are influenced by their emotions more than anything else. They act and more often react based upon, in that moment, feelings spurred by, in that moment, incentives. Reward them in the ways that matter most to them, in the form of currency that is appealing to their natures, and they'll fall to desired task, be that mothers and wives in the past, or single mother tax chattel in the present. And the current incentives in place now pay women to be single and have babies out of wedlock. Women are emotionally cued, you see, to go along, to get along, and to follow whoever or whatever is rewarding them with resources. In the past, going along to get along, i.e. following the social norms, meant to get married and take care of a family. Today, the social pressure is to get a career and marry, to take advantage of a man's resources and then divorce him, or to not get married at all and simply have a kid with him so you can gain access to those resources. You see, the powers that be from all fronts are telling them to do these things, and in real time they're being rewarded for doing these things. So what are they going to do? You see, the social and resource incentives have changed in the past 60 to 70 years. Now, some of you out there might argue that this is the fault of men. Oh, it's their fault for going along, not challenging, and for directly supporting these women via marrying them and having kids with them and cohabitating with them. However, you have to keep in mind that the same powers that be that have weaponized women's biology against them have also weaponized men's biology against their best interests. You see, men's biological imperative is to protect and provide. It's that simple. We want to protect women and provide for them. But nowadays you've got the media, the government, academia, and even private businesses in the form of large corporations all spewing the same message. Women good, men bad, women victims, men oppressors, or at the very least, women good, help women, and no mention of men at all, unless to talk about them in the negative. No such thing. No such thing is said about men's gender roles, except that they should be more like women in demeanor. Otherwise, keep the status quo. This, of course, to try and make men more emotional, right? And less analytical, so as to make it less likely that they'll see the negative outcomes of the current goings-on. The current goings-on that are incentivized by the powers that be. So men are expected to and told to sacrifice, sacrifice, sacrifice. Powers that be have weaponized this aspect of the male psyche, our want to protect and our willingness to sacrifice. Well, they've weaponized it to an extreme degree by constantly playing up the dangers that women face, and with constant calls to action to aid women. Meanwhile, men tend to do a cost-benefit analysis, unlike women who act in the moment on emotion, and we tend to look at the pros and the cons of a given choice. Will this course be more likely to bring down the woolly mammoth, Or should I take another course? And if so, what should that course be? You see, men are more able to think for ourselves and do what's ultimately best for our own well-being. Now, if that's the case, you ask, why are we even having any issues at all? Why have things not returned to a more gender role-oriented state of being that supports balance and not these absurd ideas of equity, teaching everybody that they're interchangeable widgets and we're all born as some kind of blank slate? Well, because most modern men suffer from not only a lack of understanding in regards to what's best for them and for women, but also because of a reduction in the number of desirable women who fit what we as men want and are biologically cued to desire. In turn, men's competitive natures have been amped up to 11 on a scale of 1 to 10. Now, these kind of competitive desires, our natures amped up to such a degree, can cloud our minds in the same way that emotions can and usually do cloud a woman's mind. Couple this hyper-competitive environment with men's desire to protect and provide being weaponized against them, and it's very hard for the average man to fight back against their biology if they even know that that's what they should be doing in the first place. Yes, there are some men out there who see the current paradigm shift for what it is and choose not to participate, thinking that in depriving women of their resources, time, and attention, that this is going to eventually cause a paradigm shift back to balance. However, there's a number of problems with this conclusion. First, women go where the incentives are. It's that simple. They follow the incentives, and more importantly, they follow the social pressures. Seen as every outlet for messaging is controlled by the same forces that are rewarding women's current behavior, the likelihood that women will stop responding to these social and monetary incentives because of a relatively small group of men disapproving, well, that's not a very realistic expectation. Second, women still spend 85% of the money. They spend 85% of the money that gets spent, so the "you go girl, slay queen" messaging coming from private companies isn't gonna change. Nor will the government's pandering to women change either, as women tend to act and vote as a monolith when it comes to serving their own best interest, or what they think is in their best interest, what they've been taught is in their best interest. The status quo, by the way, does just that. So there's no incentive for women to change how they vote or spend their money. Third, most men competing for women's attention will do and say what they feel is needed to gain access to her reproductive processes. That includes voting, as the women do. And since men no longer have access to the thousands of years of insight gleaned by men of the past, since they no longer have access to that mentorship that comes from having a masculine father figure in the home to pass on that knowledge, and because all Western countries have been polluted with the ideas of egalitarianism, there's simply not enough men out there who know any better that are willing to go against the grain in any real way, let alone teach other men and women by word or example. Fourth, the resource well isn't going to run dry until it's too late. You see, the weaponization of women against men and against families, it serves another purpose. And such as we are seeing now is only a means to an end. That end being power and control. Ultimately, power that is being centralized at this very moment, that's not being centralized and safeguarded to eventually be handed over to women. No. That power is for the real powers of the world. The ones who pull the puppet strings of the people who tell you that you'll eat bugs, own nothing, and be happy. The same powers that control our government and the governments of the world. They print the money and they steal it as well. As long as women continue to be paid to be without virtue, nothing's going to change. And the payments won't stop until those funding the degeneration of Western culture have the power that they desire. Your income tax? Well, that pays the interest on the fake money that we're still using, the printed funny money that's used to bribe women. And also you pay the not so hidden tax caused by inflation, as ever more money is printed to pay off women to act against their own best interests. Fifth, you. Well, you're too concerned with survival to pay anything else much heed. And you're too poor to really do anything about it, even if you did care. So you don't have enough resources to break away, nor do you have the time to even consider doing such. If there's one thing that endless illegal aliens, out of control inflation, and ever-increasing costs for energy, food, goods, services of all kinds guarantees, is that there will be no middle class of any note. There's just the minority of the wealthy and the vast majority of the poor. And because the cost of living is so high, and it's getting ever higher, more and more people have less and less to survive on. This makes more and more people ever more dependent upon the government, as well as ever more folks being so concerned with survival that they don't have the time or the energy to put toward anything else. Those people that could affect change, if not otherwise engaged, well, they can't. They're too busy surviving. The most reasonable people out there tend to be those who are the most realistic and in turn the most productive. And if they had less concerns, they might do more to counter the encroaching doom we're all facing. Sadly, such is not the case. In addition, entrepreneurship, that most excellent quality of a capitalist system, is on the decline. That's right. The koofity-koof shut down. That occurred not too long ago. Well, that also shut down the vast majority of small businesses in America, leaving only large corporate entities to operate and profit. And profit they did. Many small businesses that were shut down never reopened, leaving only a handful of large corporate interests to supply most of our needs for goods and services. In addition, thanks to ever-increasing prices for everything, coupled with inflation, reducing the value of wages consistently means less savings in general. And less savings means less people can afford to open businesses, which means less successful people, which means less people that can afford to open their own businesses, to have the wealth, to stand on their own 2 feet, to not be dependent on the government, and thereby they don't have the time or the energy or the inclination to push back against the ever-encroaching new normal. Corporate entities, who control ever more of the market share, well, they have little to no competition to worry about. Thanks to this new normal and the shutting down of their competition, so now they can spread the message ad infinitum, thanks to the current state of affairs, which they do. And by the way, those same corporate entities, well, they are majority owned by just 3, count them, 3 investment firms that themselves control, at minimum, $10 trillion in assets that can be accounted for. It's probably more, but it's at least that. And these investment firms, well, they're funded to no small extent by, you guessed it, government pension programs, meaning your tax dollars are paying so-called private entities to spread the message. Yeah, stakeholder capitalism at work, baby, to indoctrinate you into the new normal and keep you a broke mofo. 6th, large corporate entities, well, they're gaining ever more market share because of all this centralized control and because of the symbiotic relationship that exists between them and big government. An investment from government money, meaning your money, because the government actually has no money, they just steal from you. So these large corporate entities are incentivized to push the party line, meaning the message. And if they do that, well, the government will continue to push woke policies that impoverish all but a select few, thereby reducing what competition does exist or could exist in the future, making sure that no new competition rises up to take much desired market share away from those already existent large corporations. Big corporate entities get bigger and bigger, and we're able to control the masses via the public sector in ways the government isn't yet able or allowed to do. And government grows ever larger in turn and more powerful as well. And finally, well, you have men and women's natures being weaponized against them, and against each other, and against families. You have men competing for ever more rarefied resources, namely marriageable, childbearing women. And you have women's want for validation, approval, and resources, all used against them to serve a greater, more nefarious purpose, all a means to an end. So you can walk away as much as you like. You can refuse to directly pay women as much as you want. It'll make no difference. You're still going to get taxed to pay women off. Your money is still going to be devalued as the government, at the behest of their global masters, borrow ever more money to pay women off. The government's still going to use your money to pay off private companies to spread the message to their own enrichment and empowerment. Walking away will change nothing in these regards, except to improve your well-being as a man, which of course it will. But it's not going to change anything in regards to the status quo. The only thing that's going to make a change is education and collective suffering, telling men the truth and sharing the wisdom that has been lost because feminism destroyed the family and broke the chain of mentorship that passed thousands of years of knowledge from father to son. Shifting things back to balance, it's going to take time, and it's going to be a slow, plodding, painful process. Similar to the one that the cultural Marxists, i.e. Effinists, took to get us where we are now. And it's going to require at least a century or more of using the enemy's own tools against them to deconstruct their paradigm, their false paradigm, and replace it with one that recognizes objective reality and pushes gender roles that allow culture, that allows our world to function normally and in balance. Anyhow, I'm sorry for what may seem like a black-pilled view. Reality is often a harsh mistress. And in truth, I found it's more harsh than not. But in its harshness, there is a kindness, as such brutal honesty most quickly and thoroughly acclimates you to the reality that you're existing in and helps you to accept and adapt to it. Only then are you going to be able to change things for the better, when you see things for what they actually are, as opposed to how you would like them to be. So get it out of your head that walking away will do anything other than make your life individually better, which it will, but it won't change anything on a grander scale. For you see, the deck is stacked against us men. And the best step to make your life better, number one, is to walk away. And work to educate as many people as you can in what ways you can to make the world a better place. This might seem like a small thing, but if enough people do so, it can change the world. Anyhow, I hope you've enjoyed this analysis and found it beneficial to the improvement of your life and your well-being. I am the Bachelor Philosopher, also known as the Realist Philosopher, and I wish you all a good and pleasant day. Take care.